1 in 5 suffer.
Erase the stigma.
Brain difference is not a crime.
Mental health isn't just your problem.
It's our problem.
And now, Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave.
Welcome to Mental Health Mondays.
David and myself. I am myself.
Right. And I am Dave, obviously. But before we actually get going on the show today, we want to remind you to text the word GIVE, G-I-V-E, to 818-698-1021 and support our $1 Today Keeps the Stigma Away campaign.
We are determined to erase the stigma surrounding mental health, and that's how you can help us do just that.
Now, you might see that crutch in the background there, and you might be saying, oh, what happened, Dave? And you might want to say, oh, you know, some people say stuff like that. But I blew up my Achilles. And we think I blew up my Achilles on Saturday, so I'll get my MRI later on this week, and we'll find out exactly what happened to me. But so far, that's what they're saying. I'm minus an Achilles. I want to introduce our guest today as a mental health advocate, as a first-generation immigrant. He began his advocacy at the early age of 13, and by the time he was 21, he drafted an historic LGBTQ plus proclamation for his hometown of Woodland, California.
Woodland,
California. After graduating from San Francisco State University, Juan's work has been focused on underserved communities, specifically the LGBTQ plus, immigrants, and the Latinx communities. Having served on various national committees, he regularly speaks at national conferences and festivals, including the United Nations side events and the White House first ever Youth Mental Health Action Forum, where he spoke alongside the First Lady of the United States, Dr. Jill Biden, Selena Gomez, and U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy. While we could keep listing all his accomplishments, as they are many, today we're going to focus the conversation on the language or semantic of mental health and the need for a safe space in which to do so. When we come back, our guest is Juan Acosta. Don't move.
When Dave and Marla get together, it's hot.
Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave and NAMI San Fernando Valley believe it doesn't take much to make life a little better for our neighbors, coworkers, friends, our family members, even our children who suffer with mental illness. When you support our $1 Today Keeps the Stigma Away campaign, you are doing your part to erase the stigma surrounding mental illness. For just $1 today, or $1 a day for 1 week, just $7, we can look forward to a future that does not include the unfortunate and uncomfortable stares, bullying, and the subsequent isolation that our loved ones who suffer with brain differences deal with. Text the word GIVE, that's G-I-V-E, to 818-698-1021 to donate. $1 today keeps the stigma away. Brought to you by Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave and NAMI San Fernando Valley.
All right, we are back, and as promised, we are welcoming Juan Acosta. Welcome to Mental Health Mondays with Juan and Dave.
Oh, thank you.
Juan, let me start by saying you have an amazing background. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I like yours as well.
One of the things I said in the intro, and I could barely keep my breath and have enough air to actually finish the intro for your numerous accomplishments. One of the ones that I left off was that you're actually a board member of the Steinberg Institute currently, correct?
Correct.
And what does the Steinberg Institute actually do?
Yeah, so Steinberg Institute is dedicated to policy legislation, specifically around mental health. And so we work in Sacramento with the board to just make sure that we are keeping an eye on all mental health related legislation in the state of California to make sure that it's in line with our values, my personal values, as I mentioned. I believe in equity, and it's not just a belief. I believe that it impacts our mental health, the way the system operates. And for me, it's really important that the future of how we operate in the mental health field and in the system is proactive rather than reactive. And I think we have for years been operating under a reactive system that is responsive to people's crises. But what we need to do is be preventing the crises from even happening.
That's amazing. So it's always good for all of us to know, everyone. Here's what I love about the journey that I too am walking, that finding out how we're all connected and what brought you to the point of making this your life focus.
Yeah, so this is my life focus, not necessarily because I wanted it to be. It became my life focus and my mission out of my own need for survival. At a very young age, I was struggling with my own mental health, specifically at the age of 13. Coming here as an immigrant, it was really difficult to figure out many of these systems myself, and at the same time trying to support my parents and also understanding language barriers for them. So there was a lot that we were unfamiliar with. And after that, as I progressed in grade school, I was being bullied because of what people assumed my sexuality to be. And whether it was right or wrong, I'm not saying they were wrong, but what I'm saying is that it took that power away from me to share that piece of me at a time where I wasn't ready yet and where I hadn't fully discovered who I was. And it made it really difficult to feel safe enough to even speak to my parents about it. So I repressed a lot of what I was feeling at the time, and it made my life a living hell because I was feeling many complex emotions. And then I started feeling physically ill. I started getting stomach aches. I was shaky all the time. I really didn't like going to school.
Actual trauma.
Yeah, it really, every time I got dropped off at school, it was kind of a fear that just happened right away. And I remember I used to always want to stay home sick or just leave early. It wasn't a great experience. And there was times where I would go home and just go into my room and just cry out into my pillow, pray that I wasn't gay because I did not like being labeled as such. I thought it was something negative because that's what people made me feel it was. And it was really complex. And just growing up in a traditional Mexican household and what I heard in Spanish media back when I was growing up, it was really homophobic at the time. Even hearing from my extended family members, some cousins as well, just really talk negatively about the LGBTQ plus community. Whether they knew
were they aiming those comments at you specifically, or is just the community?
The community, just based on what they saw on television, and I think
just the normal stigma.
You're hearing organic feedback, right, from your family, which scared you more.
Yeah, because I was like, if you're expressing yourself about these individuals you see on TV in this terrible way, without necessarily knowing directly,
identifying you, exactly.
Yes, it just made me feel unsafe to be myself. And I think that's why it took so long for me to be able to really own my identity and own my light in that way. And
at that point, were you already aware of your identity, or were you still working through that? Was it trauma part of the, I guess is what you're saying, that trauma was part of what took so long for you to work through those feelings because you were afraid to explore them, I would imagine.
Yeah, I was definitely afraid. I knew at the time where these comments were being made that who I was, but it was more that fear that I wanted to first make sure I was okay with being without my family. And for years, I built barriers in communication with my parents because my plan was that if they were to reject me, I wouldn't be as attached to them anymore. So I would be able to just go on with my life, living my truth without feeling a need to be around my people.
Right.
Have to make a choice between who you are and who you come from, really.
So at one point, you had to turn the corner, or there had to be an acceptance, or when was the point that you knew that advocacy for or healing for you was going to be something that you absolutely had to invest yourself in?
I think it was the point where I realized that I wasn't really living my life. I was alive in the sense that I was, yes, breathing and eating and doing all of that, but I wasn't living. I felt really like tied up to these stigmas, to all of the stuff that I heard around me. And my breaking point was just that, finding and the strength in me to really want to live. And I think it was when I started to become more familiar with mental health terminology, and when I started seeing people in media, meeting people around me who were just like me, and I feel less alone in that struggle. And that's when I decided, like, I need to do what I can to try and change this for other people who come after me, and also to contribute to the efforts that people have been making before me. That was my approach in this.
Well, and what was the first step that you took toward advocacy?
Yeah, for me, I started volunteering at a nonprofit here in Woodland. It was called the YOLO Family Resource Center. It's now Empower YOLO, but they had a youth council. And we used to do a lot of like advocacy work there about mental health, climate change, etc. But that really ignited that passion in me, where after that I was like, hold up, there's a bunch of people who are also experiencing these things and who are also trying to change it. And it gave like a new sense, a new breath of fresh air to my life. So it was kind of a no-brainer after that to continue down the path. And thankfully, as you mentioned during the introduction, I think about it now, and it's like the more you go about it, it's really difficult to be an advocacy. I'm sure you all know this. I'm sure these conversations are never easy. But they are so fulfilling, and it's so fulfilling to be able to see and open up spaces and conversations with people, being intentional in what you're talking about and the approach you're trying to take to try and better our environments for everybody.
Well, there's several questions that I definitely have for you that I just would love to have you expound on here on our show, starting with a lot of the conversations and myths that we hear. A lot of people will say that, how do you respond to those who say that homosexuality or LGBTQ plus community is a mental illness? And I don't answer that just yet. I want you to jump into that, because the assignment of that is something huge that a lot of people grapple with. But when we come back from this break, we're going to get that answer. So think about that question, and when we come back, you and your beautiful background can respond.
It's time for the Mental Health Minute with Marla and Dave.
With all the progress that has been made in the field of mental health, unfortunately, there's still a great deal of stigma surrounding the subject. Many times we don't talk about how we feel, and we try to suppress our negative thoughts and emotions. But this only leads to ineffective and even harmful ways of coping, such as turning to alcohol or drugs, emotional eating, or other unhealthy ways of dealing with symptoms, according to Dr. Judy Ho.
She goes on to say, seek professional support if you need, and know that it is normal to have periods of difficulty and stress where you might need to enlist the help of someone who specializes in this area.
So with the difficult times all of us have experienced during the last few years, know that you are not alone and that the resulting symptoms are treatable. You can return to a quality of life that will be satisfying to you as an individual.
This message has been brought to you by Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave.
I never do anything without thinking about it first.
Marla is a feeler.
I basically live my personality on my sleeve.
But when Marla and Dave get together, it's like a match dancing with a firecracker.
All right, we're back. And Juan, I asked you that question, and I would love for you to also follow up with several, because this is something that you have been an advocate to help to open this conversation and make this space safe. A few of the things that are not helpful, or that are helpful in the things that you can say to someone to be able to bridge that gap.
And the reason why, let me add this before you answer, Juan. Marla asked about people considering members of the LGBTQ plus community dealing with some sort of mental illness. And we had thought, just like with issues about racism, we thought we had progressed much further than that. But nowadays, it seems like that extreme stigmatizing language and the way that we treat each other is coming back into our politics and into our society. What do you have to say about that?
I don't think we have enough time to hear all I have to say about it. But what I will say is that it's quite literally not true. It's not in the DSM anymore, the first and foremost as a fact. But most importantly, it's not something that you can pass on to anyone else. It's something that is real, that is exactly who the person is. For me, I didn't choose to be this way. It's not something that I was diagnosed with. I just am.
Right.
I think the more that we are able to really educate ourselves on the impact of this dangerous rhetoric, right? I appreciate that you mentioned how it's, plagued into politics right now. And I think as leaders, we shouldn't be making it more difficult for young people, especially members of the LGBTQ plus community, to live. I think if we are true leaders, we want to support young people and who they are and people in general. I think we thrive when we are supporting one another. You mentioned the parallels to racism and stuff. People will always have stereotypes about all kinds of people. Doesn't mean that it's true. It doesn't mean that it's right. And I think the more we can do as individuals to educate ourselves and to create our own safe spaces for people, whether we're part of the community or not, just respecting people for who they are goes a long way. And members of the LGBTQ plus community have existed forever. This isn't new. It's not a new virus. It's nothing new. It is who people are. And if there's more people statistically that identify as member of the LGBTQ plus community, then that means we're doing something right, because we're shifting from people living that
in the shadows,
closed doors. We're allowing
living as the other
to come out and be who they truly are.
Yeah.
Well, I want to piggyback on that, because in the way that I approach this, to me, like you're saying, the trauma to me exists when it's what someone has to go through in suppression and in hiding. It's the inability to deal with it that really does create the pathologies and the anxieties and the depressions that we're dealing with. It's not the other way around. Like you're saying, this is not something that you catch, this in reality. So I just want to I'm glad to hear you say it, and I want to reiterate it and reframe it and refocus it, because I think that it's super important that, we're literally creating all of this trauma around who someone is and who they choose to genuinely love. That's a problem for me.
Exactly.
And what specifically, when you say we can do better as a society on the language that we use, the semantic that we use, not just surrounding mental health, but surrounding how we communicate what is becoming, unfortunately, disparate communities instead of everybody coming together as one society? How can our language help bridge that gap?
I think it's really just, as I mentioned a little bit of my story, me listening to my cousin speak so negatively about the community was something that messed with my head at that age. And I think if we're in our family environments, just, you never know if your nephew or your niece might identify as a member of the LGBTQ plus community. So our words have an impact. And also not assuming who somebody is, right? I think it's really important not to assume who someone is and not tell people who they are. I see a lot of terrible comments on social media sometimes. If someone's saying they identify as something, they're like, I'm not going to respect blah, 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 blah. That's their prerogative. But I think if we're really trying to support our community, the community in general, I'm talking about the global community, not just the LGBTQ plus community, we should be listening to what people say and respecting who they are.
Dave?
Oh, well, no, I appreciate. I thought you, excuse me. I thought you were about to make a comment, and I do appreciate that. I think, if I were to just one of the ways that I actually look at problems is I try to put myself on the other side of the problem, and I wonder if I was raised in a family where bigotry was the language of the household, and I was different than the rest of the family. I wonder what I could do versus just, hopefully one day getting up the courage to stand up to that bigotry that I hear all around me. And I'm going to ask you because that's obviously what you had to do, but to get a little bit more into what that felt like, literally being raised in a family where, because in the African American community as well, throughout history, we all know that the LGBTQ plus have always been with us as just as upstanding members of the community. Unfortunately, the bigotry and the language that like you pointed out, has always been there as well. And it always seems like it takes a big, surge of energy just to come out and say, this is who I am. Almost like you said, with a expectation of pushback, so that just in case I've already hardened myself emotionally, that I don't need you. You know what I mean? That nuance, that feeling is important.
To me, that's what I kind of heard Juan's answer to be. That is the fallout. The fallout is that he had to consider first how I sever myself from my own actual family so I can cope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I made that decision, right? But when I did come out to my family, my parents were both lovely and accepting. It took my dad, he was really accepting, but it took him a while to understand. And by a while, I mean a couple of days, as like just to like talk some things. And I think I never have an issue with that because I know people grow up in different households. I know they grow up in different generations.
Mm.
And what's lovely about that is that you're able to grow together, right? And I think not just with my dad, but in general as a society, but you must be wanting to do so. When we're closed off to wanting to learn and we think we have it all figured out, we're set in how we're in our ways and just looking at this direction and not looking at everything else on the sides, we lose so much and we lose a lot of lovely people being in our lives because of that. And the more, and I've heard it many times and I've seen it many times, there's been a lot of people who were previously more homophobic towards the community. And then once they have someone in their life, in their families, or they meet members of the community, they're like, actually, I was wrong. And it happened with one of my high school friends. He used to talk a lot about me previously to being my friend. And I remember once he started to get to know me, he came up to me, he apologized. He said, hey, I just want to apologize. Before meeting you, I used to say X, Y, and Z, but I love you, I respect you, and I really appreciate that you are entirely yourself. And I think that to me shows growth, and I think that's what we as a society should be doing. Regardless of our past, it's really more about learning.
So I appreciate the fact that you're bringing your experiences, Juan, to this platform, because I think that it's needed every day, and it's something that I absolutely applaud. We're going to come right back. We got a poll question, and then we want you to close us out. It's never long enough, but you've been amazing. So we'll be right back after the break.
All right, that music says it's time for the poll question. And Juan, usually on some of these segments, our guests are sitting back waiting patiently, but this time you're part of the segment. We need you to chime in and give us your best guess on the questions that we're about to ask. Marla, what was the poll question last week? And is the poll question last week cumbersome?
Did you not want to highlight my dancing?
Oh, your dancing is exquisite. You better go, girl. Frame that up.
You know what? The frame is very small, so I have to keep my moves tight. Last week we asked, compared to homicide statistics in the United States, death by suicide is A, 50%, one half, equal 1-to-1, or 200%, twice as many?
Again, so since that came out kind of cumbersome, I recognized it when I was actually writing it down. Compared to homicide statistics in the US, death by suicide is either half as much, equal to homicides, or twice as many. Juan, what do you think the answer is?
Twice as many.
Unfortunately, suicide is the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 30.
And you are right, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, our guest last week also got the correct answer, because you know, got to come back and check out your averages here. So let me give you another Mr. Smarty Pant, Juan.
The question for next week.
Next week's poll question is this: what percentage of U.S. adults suffer from anxiety disorders? A, 29%, B, 34%, or C, 47%?
47.
Now, you did give us an answer, but you won't get the actual results until next week's show.
Juan, thanks for being a great guest and a good sport as well. We're going to get right back to the conversation. All right, and just like that, we are back. I want to remind everyone that you can find those poll questions on our social media outlets, all the social media outlets, Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave. And the answer for next week has been updated because it's the information, the statistics have changed post-pandemic. So we'll keep you updated.
Well, wait a minute. Does that mean that we can't qualify Juan Smarty Pantness?
Oh no, it can be qualified because the answer has already been updated.
Oh, okay. Because I just, I don't want to unseat him. I think Juan is smart no matter what. So let's just keep that. Juan.
Oh, go ahead, Marla. I'm sorry.
No. I was just going to say, Juan, as we said, our time is always short. You've been amazing and given us great information, but I really just this is such an important topic for all of us. I think I want to turn it over to you for you to give us your best experiential advice for all of us going forward who truly have the desire to make things better and to make that space, not just for the LGBTQ plus community, but for all. I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, well, thank you again for having me. I think just in closing, I would just say that suicide is preventable. I know it's National Suicide Prevention Week, and I would like to echo that suicide is preventable and that talking is the first step to preventing suicide. We can all do our part by creating those safe spaces that we've been talking about, by respecting people and making them feel safe enough to open up and go to you, to take you up into their head and let you know how they're feeling. It's more important than ever for us to have intentional conversations in a world where technology rules our lives now, where we're constantly on our phones. We seem to be more connected than ever, but I think as a society, we're more disconnected than ever.
Absolutely.
And it's important for us to do our part, what we can do in our families and our community to make sure that we're checking in on our loved ones, those who seem sad and those who seem happy as well, because we never know what people are going through. And if you are going through a difficult time, I would just urge you to receive support, whether it's from a resource, from a friend, from a family member, whoever it may be. But the fight is worth it. And, we need to take each other out of that dark space sometimes. And we are all more than one moment. We're more than one moment of success and more than one moment of failure or feeling like we're not good enough. There's so much more in between. And I just hope everyone's able to find their way out.
That's awesome.
That's very beautifully said. And I've been thinking about something that you said before we went to the break, as we were talking about how the wonderful ways in which your family, specifically your father, was able to receive new information, take a minute to process, which is okay, because when things are different than what we anticipate, you got to process that information. But then he came around, and I think maybe that could be the key to some more empathy in our society, is to remember that, just like you said, check on somebody when you can see that they're not feeling good. Because if the stigma is already there in the environment, when someone doesn't feel good about a subject that is stigmatized, they won't necessarily want to speak up. But if you ask, how are you doing? What's really going on? And don't let them just get off the hook by saying, oh, nothing. You can tell something's wrong. You can tell me, and be that listening ear. Suddenly it opens the door to say, well, this is what, maybe the opportunity to say, this is what I'm actually dealing with. And maybe that understanding of relationship first before we start to see the things that separate us. Maybe that might be the key.
Personal connection is key.
Being intentional, actual conversations, not small talk. That's all. That's what it's all about.
Man, we appreciate you, Juan.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate
you
for
joining us. Where can people find you?
It's Juan Acosta with 2 underscores at the end on social media, and then that's my website right there. I see it.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
All right, thanks
so
again for joining us. You've been amazing.
Thank you all for having me.
Success with all the work that you do.
Likewise, thank you for doing this. For real, I appreciate it.
Thank you. See you guys next week.
It's raw, real, and unfiltered.